While the IMA remains closed for the time being, we are extremely active online. So please stay connected by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We've just launched an IMA at home page on our website where we've curated a lot of the content from the website and put it all onto one page. And we're also adding themed weekly activities onto this page as part of our Beat the Boredom program for kids and families. And really exciting stuff. Next week we'll be going live with our very first online Ramadan exhibition. This is co-curated by artist Bere Izenbay and featuring the work of 10 young Melburnian Muslim artists. And while we're on the topic of Muslim artists, if you do know of any Muslim artists, please help us spread the word. We have opened artist registrations for AMA, Australian Muslim Artists 2020. And thanks to the support from La Trobe University, we're offering an art prize of $15,000. So please let people know about this wonderful opportunity. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Special welcome to our three esteemed guests. We have Sheikh Ala Zukum, who is the Imam of Heidelberg Mosque. Welcome, Sheikh. Monique Tui, psychologist at Nasiha Consulting in Broadmeadows. And Maysa Fahur, emotional intelligence coach and mother of 4 children. So we're going to start by addressing the elephant in the room, which is the COVID pandemic and how it has impacted the Muslim community. And then we'll be exploring ways in which we can make the most of Ramadan during such challenging times. This is going to be an interactive session, so we really hope that the audience can get involved and submit your questions via the Q&A icon down below. You can remain anonymous while submitting questions. And if you want to direct your question to a particular panelist, please let us know in the chat. We'll try and get to as many questions as possible, but time permitting. But if we can't get through to everybody, inshallah, we have intention of getting back to you individually, inshallah. So let's begin with Sheikh Ala. Many of us in the Muslim community are really trying hard to come to the terms with the fact that the restrictions being placed on us in the last few months to avoid the spread of infection means that we can no longer pray in the mosque. Salat al-Jummah is no longer available to us. Even Saudi Arabia has suspended entry to the 2 holiest mosques. There's certainly no precedence of anything like that happening here in Australia in our lifetime. I've been 50 years on this earth and nothing like that's ever happened here. And my question is there, historically speaking, an Islamic precedence for this happening previously in Islamic history? Have Muslims had to endure something like this in the past?
Yeah. Okay, firstly, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon you all. And we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Peace and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and all the prophets and messengers. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He gathered us in this blessed gathering to gather us with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in paradise. Allahumma ameen. Thank you, Sister Shireen, and all the respected guests and the participants, our brothers and sisters, Sister Maysa, Sister Monique, and Sister May, all the brothers and sisters for their participation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for this. Getting back to the history, yes, this happened. And one of the famous incidents that happened in the history of Islam is actually after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What happened at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of not going to the mosque and praying the 5 daily prayers and praying in congregation with the Muslims? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the Muslims to pray at home in a time of a heavy rain, when it was a dangerous thing for the Muslims to get out of the house and go to the mosque. Even the companions, you know, the words of the adhan, when they say Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, after this we say Hayya ala salah, come to the prayer. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions, after him, they used to replace these words with another words, which is pray at your home. So this happened in a situation of heavy rain. And now we are in a very, hard disease that is spreading everywhere. So similarly, we take, even according to the rules of fiqh, jurisprudence, we say to the Muslims that you should not go to the mosque and pray there. And all the Muslim community now are praying at home because of the pandemic of coronavirus. This also happened after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it was actually harder for the Muslims because this happened after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though from an Islamic perspective, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in many of his sayings, which is called hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised the Muslims, especially those who are sick, to stay, to have the self-isolation that we currently have now. And he said a hadith about this. One of them is لا يوردن ممرض على مصح, that there's no person that has a disease should be mixing with the people and going to sit with them and to spend the time with them, because the disease could spread among the people that this person is mixing with. So what happened after the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the 18th year of the Hijrah of the Prophet, which is 8 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there was a very famous plague that happened at that time in a city that is called Amwas. Amwas is a city in Asham, close to Palestine. And this plague was really harsh. Many of the prominent companions of the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And I would like to mention this hadith that was mentioned in Musnad al-Imam Ahmad, that the Prophet ﷺ, after his death, when in the time of the leadership of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, the third Khalifa of the Muslims, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he had some leaders in some of the cities. One of them is Amwas, and Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, one of the companions, he's actually promised to enter Jannah, the 10 Sahaba that were promised to enter Jannah with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the time of the leadership of Umar radiallahu anhu, this plague happened, and Umar radiallahu anhu was going to take the trip to Amwas to see the situation of the people there and what's happening over there in Amwas. And he had the news about the plague that started in that city. So Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu gathered all the companions together from the Muhajirin and the Ansar, and he asked them about what he should do. Should he cancel the trip, or he should proceed with that and he go to the city where the plague is? The Sahaba argued and they said, we should go. Some of them, majority of them said we shouldn't go, until one of the Sahaba came. And actually Abu Ubaidah, the leader of that city at that time, he said to Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and this is an important lesson for us as well, to know that what's happening is the qadr of Allah, is the destiny of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He destined for us. This is not a punishment, this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the Muslims and the non-Muslims, everyone. And the evidence is, Allah said that in Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ, and we shall test you with some of fear, and poverty, and naqs and lack of food and drink. And we are in a time of fear now. People are scared to get out of the house, and this is a time of a test, not a punishment, because this test happened to the Sahaba that were promised to enter Jannah. Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu, he was actually affected by this disease, and he even passed away because of it. Allah is not punishing Abu Ubaidah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, promised Abu Ubaidah to be one of the 10 people to enter paradise. How would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punish him by this disease, and at the same time he is promised to enter Jannah? So this is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to everyone. Abu Ubaidah asked Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, the leader of the Muslims at that time. He said to him, "O Umar ibn al-Khattab, since you're not coming, are we running away from the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the destiny of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Since you're not coming, is this kind of running away from the destiny of Allah?" Umar ibn Khattab replied in a very good way. He said to him, "O Abu Ubaidah, we are running away from the qadr of Allah to another qadr of Allah, which is we have to protect ourselves, which is also destined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." So at that time, Abu Ubaidah remained in his place, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, he came with the solution. He said to all the Sahaba that were having this discussion at that time, he said, "I heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, if the disease or a plague happen in your place, do not leave that place." So the Prophet ﷺ is calling for the self-isolation now.
Oh.
And he is advising the people not to leave the place because they may get the disease and they go and they spread the disease among other people. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when the disease, especially the plague, happen, do not mix with people, do not travel to another city. And if it happens in another place, another country, another city, do not go to that place so you may not catch the disease that is in that city. And Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu decided not to travel according to even now we have the same, precautions that we have taken in our country and the self-isolation as well. So this happened, and many of the prominent Sahaba, Abu Ubaidah, this Sahabi that was promised to enter Jannah, passed away because of this. Mu'adh ibn Jabal passed away because of the plague. It happened in the time of Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu, who took the lesson from this. And actually, people are learning when the situation is happening. Sometimes we don't have an experience with what's happening. Amr ibn al-As, in the year of 40 of the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, when the plague happened, he advised the people, he said to them, تَفَرَّقُوا فِي الْجِبَالِ, go and spread away from each other, spread in the mountains so that you're not mixing with each other. And at that time as well, the historians who are talking about these incidents in the history of Islam mention that the Salatul Jama'ah and the Salah in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ stopped because of these plagues.
SubhanAllah, Sheikh. I'm sure many of the Muslims listening found your words very, very comforting, and also a reminder that this is not a punishment. It's a test,
yes.
And it's something similar to what
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. He would have said, we shall punish you with something of fear.
Yeah.
But he said, we shall test you.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, that's fascinating. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for that. But if we can bring it back to you, to Monique, my question is, from a psychologist's point of view, why does change induce so much stress? Just looking around, myself personally, my stress levels have never been this high before. What is it about change that induces so much stress?
I think this is pretty unprecedented. I think that, even when many of us even just get a cold or are in some way impacted by a minor medical illness, like it causes a degree of stress in us because it's going to interrupt our functioning in some small way. And this is on a global scale. And I think that there's actually there's a fair bit of research about how people react. This of course is actually not the first pandemic that's ever occurred, and particularly as much as it might be the first large-scale pandemic in Australia for some time, but overseas there's been different pandemics, and humans they've found react to these type of really large-scale events in very similar ways, in the same way that if something traumatic happens to us, we're fairly stereotypical in terms of how we respond to stress. It's sort of why it's quite predictable for psychologists to go, oh, okay, so if you're experiencing shortness of breath, heart palpitations, that more than likely that might be related to feeling quite stressed. But in terms of a human reaction to a pandemic, there's a sort of a large group of people that will go into denial and sort of minimize the enormity or the impact of the event, and that in itself is that almost an aversion to wanting to acknowledge the situation or the scale of the situation. Like this isn't really happening, and we go into denial, and almost as a way to try and control the situation, because it's just in this situation it's quite enormous. And then as soon as we start to sort of get and what had happened is we started to get more and more messaging about the impact of the virus, not just globally, but also as it started to sort of make its way to Australia. Again, that minimisation, occurred, but then it started to get our attention going, actually, this could actually really interrupt our daily functioning, or this, could affect people that we love. And as soon as people start to pay attention to all of those details, and in this case, it's paying attention to details that compromise our sense of safety and security. And we're paying attention to the possible danger. Now, of course, really sensational headlines, even about 6 weeks ago, didn't help this at all, right? So, that's what the media loves to do. The media loves to grab our attention with very, worst case scenario headlines. Well, it did its job. It got most of our attention, followed by obviously the government taking things quite seriously, and then daily briefings, and then a whole lot of, you know, slow changes. And as soon as that starts to occur, people panic. And that's what we saw with, you know, the whole toilet paper thing, and people are really starting to overreact to essentially what is unprecedented, what is causing huge upheaval in people's day. But at the end of the day, most of us are actually still quite safe. That's the reality. Most of us are actually still safe. And in fact, all of the measures that are being put in place is to actually keep reassuring ourselves and keeping our society as safe as possible, right? But the changes that people have had to undergo is throwing up really normal psychological distress that people may not have experienced before. And those that have, because they've gone through other big changes in their life, it'll be almost familiar to them. That's why some people are saying, oh, we've gone through big things before, we can sort of cope with this degree of stress. And then for some perhaps young people or people who haven't had sort of anything major happen in their life, this is quite confronting. Yeah, but so but this is a little bit like, it's basic. And so as much as people, I think a few weeks ago had gone into panic, I think what we're seeing right now is people actually starting to really adapt. They don't like what's happening. They are looking forward to when all of these, you know, social distancing measures can and the restrictions, you know, are going to, you know, disappear. Again, there's no idea when that's going to occur. But for the moment now, people are talking about adaptation. And as a result of talking about adaptation, there's lots of conversations which I'm pretty happy about in mainstream media, and that's around looking at supporting people's mental health, understanding that that's being pressured right now, and that this needs to be a community conversation. The other thing is, you know, there's certain coping mechanisms, which we'll talk about a little bit later, that are actually fundamentally being taken away from us. So accessing family support, we might commonly do when we feel stressed, is we go to the reassurance of something that is secure and certain, and that's having access to family members. And that may well have changed significantly for people. So again, up comes the stress. But you know what? Change doesn't stress everyone. It actually doesn't. And not all stress is bad, right? Stress is adaptive. It gets us to pay attention to the danger in the environment potentially, and to be cautious enough, and then to go into planning. But what most people are going into is worry about a whole lot of things maybe that haven't happened yet, or that might happen, or that might be on their way to happening. But planning, we need to basically rescue our endless worries with planning for today. What can we do today to make ourselves feel more certain? What do we need to do over the next week, and perhaps over the next couple of months, to bring certainty? Because where there's certainty, we relax. Yeah.
So it's important to note that it's okay to feel a bit stressed, because it just makes us a bit more cautious, but just not get consumed with the worry, I suppose. Yeah. Keep that one in mind for sure, absolutely. But I'm really looking forward to exploring this a bit more in detail later on. Mesa, this is particularly difficult for children. My goodness, it's hard enough as an adult to deal with this pandemic. For children, I'm wondering, what was the conversation like with your children? How did you broach the topic? What was their response?
Okay, so I've got a fairly large age group in my household, alhamdulillah. So of course I tailored the conversation to suit the particular age of that child. But in general, pre-corona, I'm a pretty big advocate for just having an open relationship with my children. We do something called family meetings. I'm all about democracy sometimes. So we've always had a chat, whether it be weekly or whatever. And when corona started to make its way, it became a bit prominent in the media, and schools were starting to talk about it, we had a chat. But I guess to answer your question, I made sure that I was okay with it first, because I have understood that children will tend to mirror, you know, whatever you put out there. So I made sure I was okay with it. I made sure that I understood what was going on, and then we had a chat. I talked to my big kids about it, and we just talked in relation to, okay, what's going to happen about technicalities, logistics, school, you know, all their sports got cancelled. Their, you know, they take music lessons that got cancelled. So life came to a halt. And I was very adamant not to let them call it the new normal. So we approach it in a way that this is just, it's a time in life that's unique, and it's not going to last forever. So let's just concentrate on the present moment. And the kids were okay. So surprisingly, from your question, I don't know if anyone else agrees, but the kids handled it okay. They had a lot of curiosity. They had fun facts here and there, believe it or not. Like, they would come home when they did go to school for a little bit. They would come home going, "Mum, do you know why it's called COVID-19?" And all these like random facts. My older kids would send me memes on the phone and go, "Mum, you know, this is what it's about." And it was all about my husband and I making sure that we understood what we could do as parents to facilitate, you know, such a different lifestyle. And let's be honest, you know, 24/7 altogether is definitely a different lifestyle. Pre-corona, you know, I was driving them everywhere, and there was a really chock-a-block full of things to do. So at the moment, I would say their biggest annoyance is, you know, probably the social aspect, not going to lie. They're missing friends and cousins terribly. But I allow them to be there, be present with that annoyance that they have, and then counteract it with, what can we do? How, like, what's an idea that we can do, think about? And it's really interesting because they come up with solutions. So give your kids the benefit of the doubt.
Kids, I think, have kept us pretty grounded, I suppose, and they're pretty resilient. I think, like you said, we've got to give them more credit.
Yeah.
Sheikh Alaa, we're taught in Islam, Sheikh, that when we endure hardship, often there is some khair or some benefit that we don't realise. Can you share with us some of the lessons you think that we can learn from this pandemic?
Because yes, that is true. Any test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us with, there is always something that is good. Even
Sorry, Sheikh, could you speak a bit louder? Sorry, maybe speak a bit louder? Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I'll give it. Yeah, so you're right. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, any test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us, there is always a benefit from it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, there is a test, even in the time of goodness, through the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is even a test. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us, how we react towards the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, our money, how we use it, our children, how we deal with them, you know, our life in general, if we are using our life in a good purpose or we're just wasting our life. This is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the hard test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us with, I would like to remind everyone that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ إِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. What an amazing, how amazing is the matter of the believer. It is all khair for him, subhanallah. Even though sometimes we see the hardship as something that is really hard. Yes, it is hard. We get sad, but there is a khair that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saving for us. From the time of hardship, we will be appreciating the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. We'll talk about the lessons, but firstly, let's have the concept of dealing with the test as there's a khair in this test that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us with. And the Prophet ﷺ says about this, in asabahu khayrun shakara fakana khayran lah. Whenever something that is good happens to him in his life, they are thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this would be good for him. When something bad happens to him, sabara fakana khayran lah. He is patient with the test of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this would be good for them as well, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is granting them more ranks, inshallah, in paradise and more reward. So one of the main lessons that we can take from the pandemic of coronavirus, you know, subhanallah, everyone is locked down now. Going outside is very limited. And we have to remember that so many blessings in our life that we do not really recognize until we are deprived from these blessings. You know, going outside, seeing our friends and our family members, going on the weekend somewhere, this was a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though for some other people, the blessing is just food and drink and many important things in their life. But for us, alhamdulillah, in Australia, we have food and drink and many other things, and we are missing going outside. We are missing going to the mosque and praying 5 times a day. We are missing our friends and going and visiting them in their houses. So this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we do not really know how important it is in our life until we are missing it now. So we have to be always appreciating the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other thing, we have to appreciate the blessing and we react upon the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we are strong, when we have our health, when we are able to do the good deeds. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reminding us for this reason that we have to hasten in our life to do the good deeds. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is asking us to take advantage of our health before we get sick and we get older. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is advising us to take advantage of the available means that we have in our life and use them in goodness and in good things and good purposes, because there is a time that we will be deprived from these things. For those who are not going to the mosque now, let's go to the mosque now. Let's start. The mosque is available because Allahu A'lam, Allah knows best that there is a situation that we cannot go to the mosque. So let's try to go to the mosque, visiting our friends and relatives, visiting our parents, visiting the good people in our life. We need to hasten to do this before a time comes when we cannot do this. And one of the other lessons as well is to think of others. You know, we have seen the people in the shopping centers taking the, toilet papers, and everyone's just taking everything without thinking of other people sometimes, which is very sad. You know, Islamically, as Muslims, even non-Muslims, everyone, we have to share with others. We have to think of them. There are some elders that cannot go outside, and in a time of a hardship, we have to check on people. We have to see how they're going, if they need something. And I've seen many initiatives, alhamdulillah, in our community now that many people are taking some, food and drink and some flowers, and they take many important things to go to visit our elders, whether Muslims or non-Muslims. We have to check on our neighbors. We have to see that everyone is mentally stable as well. So these are all blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many lessons that we can take, and we have to think of situations like this. Because alhamdulillah, we live in Australia with many blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but there's a time that we will be tested, and we have to be ready for the test, and we hasten to do the good deeds in our life.
Such a beautiful reminder, subhanAllah. And I think number one is really this has given us a time of self-reflection about all our blessings and how much we have taken for granted. I mean, I know personally I've taken so much for granted. So this has been a really valuable time to sit and reflect about these things. Thank you so much, Chef, for sharing. Monique, there may be some listeners who are experiencing some massive challenges at the moment. They might be experiencing family issues, health issues, or they may have lost their job or be on a reduced income. What are some coping mechanisms that you can perhaps suggest to help them get through such tough times?
Yeah, thanks, Shireen. I think that many Australians will be affected in some way. There's going to be some significant changes, to not just their daily lives, but some more significant things like threats to their health, pressure, put on relationships within families, and also, the possibility of stress placed on businesses, big and small, and of course, employment. I think we have to remember, Allah's not going to put a burden on us that we cannot bear. And that means, and I really love that statement when working with people who are under stress, because what the assumption behind that is that we've been given everything to cope with what we experience in life. So whether that's good and or adverse, we've got the strengths behind it to cope. So it's a really interesting question to ask ourselves. Okay, this is difficult. No one's going to underestimate how difficult a massive change like this is on people's lives. But what strengths do people bring to face the challenge, right? So not with the assumption that, oh, well, this is now put on your shoulders and you have no resources to cope and no resources to draw on, both internally, so as an individual, but also collectively, right? So what strengths do we have firstly as individuals? And the strengths could be resilience. It could be determination. It could be creativity and reliability. It could be friendliness. It could be honesty. But to take stock of all those characteristics that we have built up, perhaps over decades, mine 4 decades, of building up particular strengths, because even from when the child falls over when they're 2 years old, it's those first experiences of adversity and the experience of little tiny bits of pain that start teaching us about how to get back up again. Yeah. And so all those failures of tests that we had in high school, or all of those losses that we had of friends, or changes, or moving houses, or all those different things, or pets dying, you know, like all those little things. And at the time they seem quite big, but they're building us up and building us up and building us up to help us to keep facing other things that go on in our life. So one thing is to take, you know, to do a little bit of reflection, to go, what am I bringing to this situation? Out of all the generations in history, we were chosen in 2020 to experience this particular pandemic. Previous generations have experienced other types of major societal adversities. And of course, these occur in different parts of the world as we speak. In Australia, we're relatively protected from lots of different things. And this is a big challenge on us today. But what do we bring? Second thing is, what do we bring collectively? What are our collective strengths? So this is where people who sometimes are in difficult situations have to do one of their hardest things that they'll ever face in their life. And it's not the adversity, it's asking for help. They will take the adversity any day. And people do. They take it on their shoulders and they think, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it alone. Where, as a collective, as communities, as a society, we're here to help. And people actually feel good when they help other people. But we have to think that we are worthy of help. Like, we actually have to love ourselves enough to say, I'm worthy of help. And this could look like, so this could be a conversation about challenging people's pride. It might be that. But what I see mostly when people have to reach out for help, sometimes the help of a psychologist, the help of a charity organisation in certain situations, if it's to feed family, you know, is to really, you know, it challenges self-reliance. See, as human beings, one of our primary needs is autonomy, the need to do things on our own. All right. So obviously as a child, we're quite dependent, but even the 2-year-old tries to do things on their own. And the 4-year-old says, I want to dress myself. And the 5-year-old's arguing what they're going to eat and what they're not going to eat. And the 14-year-old, well, that's a different conversation about their phone and Facebook. Right. So we're constantly trying to attain autonomy. So what this is doing to our society and globally is reducing our feelings of autonomy, that we can make the decision to jump in our car or walk down the street or go to our mum's house, you know, or to go shopping or to socialize with our friends. And so it's challenging one of our fundamental human needs. But we're born to be ready. We're ready for it. You just have to tell yourself that. So we don't control the event. We don't control any event. It's an illusion. Allah controls every single event that occurs before us. Then it's over to us. What do we think about that? How are we going to interact with that in our mind? So what's the story that we're going to make up in our head about this? And is that story going to be one that helps us to be to have reasoned and rational emotions? So it's not good nor bad. In Islam, there's nothing bad, essentially. Everything is good for us. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be happy about everything that happens to us, because obviously we've been given the ability to experience stress, the ability to experience sadness, depression, guilt, anxiety. We have the foray of skills that all of those, even the experience of negative emotion, actually is helping us to cope with the event, which we don't control. We do control how we react to it. We do control the stories we tell ourselves. A little bit like what Mesa was saying. As if you model that this isn't the biggest thing that's ever going to happen in people's lives to our children, then they're going to go, right, so the story my mum and dad are telling me about this is there's going to be some changes in our day. That's okay. We're going to focus on the positive side of things. And we're going to probably spend more time together, which most kids want anyway, you know, and we're going to do fun things together. And, you know, sometimes you might need to go to your bedroom because you might need some space. And so you tell the story in a way that's neutral. It's not good nor bad. Now, obviously, when people's health is compromised unexpectedly, or people unexpectedly lose a job. People have that immediate normal stressful reaction. That's fine. Thankfully, that doesn't last. We can calm ourselves down. We can employ better coping strategies. We can calm ourselves down by accessing support that we need. And that could be other people who champion you, who go, that's okay, let's just say it was me. That's okay, Monique, you can do this. You know, you just have to pivot your business, or you've got to, you know, pivot your thinking about your own ability to become re-employed in a different, or you've got to be adaptive. Or how about you draw on that creativity, you know, or how about you activate this idea that you had in the past? Try that. So we activate that sort of reassuring supportive network around us that can also help us to get through it. We cope with everything in one of two main ways. We either employ healthy coping strategies, or they're unhelpful. So, for example, some people might go out and have their smoking might increase. It's a coping strategy, but it's just not that healthy. And obviously it's going to cause you some other problems. Or you could go for a walk. Highly recommend it. It's one of the best things. It's still available to us in Australia. We can still exercise, and I highly recommend it, because what it's doing, it's helping to release a whole lot of good endorphins into your system. You get fresh air. At the moment, we're still lucky with a bit of sunshine, if you can catch it, even if you're doing night walks like my husband and I have just come back from, get that fresh air and actually it's quite lovely, because there's so many other people out there doing exactly the same thing. You feel like you're part of a community, and not a little isolated suburb anymore. So just to reiterate, be mindful of what you're telling yourself about however the pandemic is affecting your life, even if you have to write it down. People's heads sometimes feel really messy, and that's why we get that sensation of feeling overwhelmed. So sometimes it's just better to get it out of your head, write down on a piece of paper, okay, what am I telling myself about this particular scenario, and then step back from it. Come back to it a little bit later, and then just sort of go, okay, how rational is that? Is that rational? Is that helpful? If I keep telling myself that story, what feelings am I basically triggering? Because whatever you're telling yourself, you are triggering feelings and emotions that come up. So if you're telling you something really catastrophizing, like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, well, you're going to make it really logical for your brain to pump heaps of cortisol into your system. It's going to give you a higher heart rate, and you're going to start to feel anxiety and have some anxiety symptoms. Or do the opposite. That might be your first reaction. So you go back and go, I don't like feeling anxious. So what can I tell myself that's going to be more calming and at least neutral? So not good, not bad, just pivoted in the middle. And then sometimes we can also modify how we feel in the moment by acting in a certain way. So as in behaving or engaging in a behavior, it could be vacuuming, it could be cooking, it could be, doing something creative, it could be playing with the kids, it could be, patting your pet. I don't know, it could be anything really, but something that's going to get your mind off it. And speaking of getting your mind off it, get your mind out of social media, get your mind off the TV, turn it off. So have heaps of hours in your day where you are not consumed by the pandemic, because you're not allowing it to enter your headspace through a billion headlines and the updated statistics. You don't need to know that every 5 minutes, as much as Channel 7 wants you to believe that you need to know how many people now have the virus 5 minutes after they just told you how many people already had it. You don't need to know it. It's not important for your day, and it'll just become overwhelming. So have absolutely times where you switch off and go out into your backyard or on your balcony or go for a walk and basically go, the world might be acting differently, but it hasn't changed. It's still the same world, and it will be in a few months when all of this lifts, inshallah.
Inshallah. Oh my goodness, so many useful strategies there, and so important for us to reframe our thinking, really, and just to remind ourselves that we're not in control, and we can only control how we respond. So thank you so much, Monique. Mesa, how do we keep flourishing as a family during these challenging times?
The idea about flourishing, it's almost like, it comes and goes when it's not, as a family, your unit needs to be strong enough to have that open communication that I was talking about. At the same time, I probably repeat this. There's two things I repeat in this household very often during these days. The first one being focus on what you can control. Focus on what I can control. I say it 100 times. My 8-year-old knows it off by heart. So, you know, really frustrating moments for them if they've realized they've missed a particular date, or things are sort of building up in terms of the anxiety they might have about how will I do this? It's not fair or whatever. It's focus on what you can control right now. Stay in the present moment. Let's not go to the future, and let's not go to the past. And immediately you notice that children's shoulders will relax and their eyes will connect with you, and they'll feel like a big load has come off their chest. But the deal is that you have to listen to them first, of course. You've got to hear their emotion and their opinion. You have to hear it and then guide them. So I say that 1,000 times a day. And the other one I say all the time is emotions come and go. So let's not hold on to that emotion and just live there. Whatever it is, I even say it about happiness or joy. It's a fleeting moment. Sometimes it lasts, don't get me wrong, but they know it. In your family, if you can start instilling these affirmations, I like to call them, the kids will get a hang of it. And now, you know, my 12-year-old knows off by heart that, you know, this anger she's feeling, the hangry that she's feeling, the anxiety she's feeling, it's going to go. But while she's in the moment, what's she going to do with it? And each human, each individual has got their own way of coping, as Monique touched on. So, you know, one particular child of mine goes quiet and goes and sits quietly in their room and reads a book, just relaxes. Another child likes to talk about it, talk and talk and talk, so on and so forth. We keep a routine. So funnily enough, human beings think they love freedom, but it's not true. It's about boundaries. Freedom means doing what you love within a certain framework, and keeping your family on somewhat of a routine is really beneficial. So if they know there's a particular thing you do every day, whether it's having breakfast together, going on that walk that we're lucky enough in Melbourne to be able to do still around the block for exercise, whether it's having, you know, a board game that you play together, having a routine. And now that we have remote learning, of course, that's added a new routine in there, which as a family, the way we flourish through remote learning is saying over and over that this is brand new. This is a brand new routine. I'm not your teacher. This is just a new experience for everybody. And the kids are really relaxed with that. It's really lovely to see in my household how it's flowing. So alhamdulillah for that. I use language and scenarios to like based on their ages. So we do a lot of role playing. We do a lot of chit chat about certain scenarios that, you know, maybe it's sitting in their mind. So as Monique touched on, once it's out of a child's mind, it just feels so much better. And then they won't think about it or dwell on it or whatever happens, you know, inside the mind. I touched on board games. So of course, Monopoly, you know, the world famous family breaker opera, you know, just get onto those really fun things. Kids love being with their parents. I don't care. It's just what they've always wanted. They love attention. They're wired for it. And even your teenager, if you can tap into what he or she love, they'll love it. 10 minutes a day, sit with them, have a chat about Fortnite, whatever it is that they're into, they'll love it. Today I went for a walk around the block with my 8-year-old, and I said, it's me and you, buddy. We have 15 minutes. Let's do this walk. And he spent 15 minutes telling me about Beyblades. I was interested because he looked happy, but I wasn't overly interested. But I just went along with it, and he was just so chirpy and happy. And it was really, really lovely to touch on. And on a final note, we've been hating on technology for so long now, and I can honestly say that during this pandemic, during this crisis, go technology, like being able to Zoom, FaceTime my mum and dad or their grandparents. It's been real. I miss them. I'm a people person. I'd love to see them, but FaceTime, thank you, Inventor, and Zoom for doing this. We jump on the internet all the time, me and the kids. My daughter makes quizzes that she sends to the family. Yeah, jump on, find some really fun activities to do together. And of course, YouTube, how can I forget? YouTube has got really amazing resources. There's yoga you could do with the kids every day. There's free dance videos to work your muscles, get them moving. So just take it all in. It's the only way forward, guys.
Awesome. Some wonderful ideas there. Thank you so much, Mesa. Monique, did you want to jump in and add anything to that topic?
Oh, Mesa's covered it so beautifully. I'm like taking notes, Mesa.
And to you as well.
I'll just reiterate, I think, you know, that it's the family that has an optimistic attitude, understands that it's important, you know, to be together, but it's also important to have distance between each other. You know, that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So you love your children more when they come home from school, you know, because they were away from you, or your husband, you know, when he was at work, or when you were at work and he was home. But when you're in this situation, you need to effectively use the space that you have to do things where you're connecting, but also do things where you have very deliberate times apart. So, and that's going to keep tensions down, and allowing people to sort of, and reminding and teaching our kids it's okay, you know, like to walk away from a situation and encouraging them to walk away, because when they're doing that, and this is also for adults too, is when you are, you know, if two people are sort of at each other, just because you're in the same space and there's little slights between siblings or between spouses, it is important to create a temporary space between you to allow emotions to calm down and to jump back up into your frontal lobe, where there's some empathy and, you know, that ability to connect well with people that goes offline if you're feeling really stressed or overwhelmed. So you don't want to be communicating with people that essentially you love when you're operating from this stressful part of your brain called the amygdala. It's very unhelpful, never ends well. So teaching our kids also, you know, how basically our bodies react when there's little slights. You know, he has my toy, she's in my space, I want to watch that show, or I want to watch that, you know, YouTube thing or whatever it is, and teaching kids to, okay, now it's time to be apart, and, you know, now it's time for quiet time, and now it's time for noisy time, ideally in the backyard. Yeah, I think that's, other than what Maister already said, totally agree. And, you know, just stepping back. And this is what the interesting thing about the pandemic is, it's getting us all to step back and evaluating, you know, the pace, the very busy pace that we have here in Australia. We're a very doing oriented culture. We like to get things done, go. And this pandemic's going, and now everything's slowed down, you know, and now take a breath. And so sometimes with kids and with adults, you find there's a degree of restlessness. And this is also part of the adaptation process. There's oh my God, I want to get something done. And now slowing down. It's a little bit like being on holidays, is the kids sort of want to go. And then by the end, they're just happy to sit in a corner and read a book. That same type of energy is going to happen to adults as well, where they go. And then very quickly they're like, oh no, I'm getting used to this slower pace in my life and less cars on the road, and get in and get out and just sort of focus on basic essential needs. So it'll be really interesting how, when these, you know, restrictions lift, what conscious choices we make about the type of lives we want to live, and particularly around.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So today's the 16th of April. Ramadan is just over a week away. SubhanAllah. Sheikh, what is your advice as to how we should approach this Ramadan? Because obviously it's going to be extremely different to any other Ramadan we've had. So we'd like to hear from you, please.
Yeah, okay, so the general advice, inshallah, that we can all have the banner of Ramadan of the family. And let's explore new things in our family, like reading Quran, having like family gathering. There are many families that I'm talking with, and they said, we discovered that our kids have, mashallah, very good talent. And they can read Quran beautifully. We never listen to the Quran from them. Some of them are, eager to be like public speakers in the future, inshallah. They can give like reminder Islamically. And as Sister Maisa mentioned, we have to have like a dialogue with our children, especially in Ramadan. And there's even one of the questions here that is saying, what can we do in Ramadan, especially for those who cannot read the Quran or recite the Quran from memory. And having Ramadan this year with family is different, because we always complain that we don't have enough time for family. And this time, inshallah, by being together, we can beautify our houses with some of the, zina for Ramadan. We put some things that is showing us that Ramadan is there. We pray Jama'ah together. And, some of the family members can be imams for the first times in their life. It's easy to go to the mosque and pray behind the imam. This time we need to have an imam from within the family members. Someone has to lead the prayer. There's no other option. We cannot pray online. So there must be an imam from the family members, and they can practice this, inshallah, so that we can increase the bond and the relationship between the family members. We can also have Taraweeh night together. We can read the Quran. We can have some of the reminders. Everyone can have a night when they can say a reminder. So it doesn't have to be the father or the mother. Someone has to take this initiative every night. And we will discover and find that our children, mashallah, they have a lot of awareness about what's happening in the community. They ask questions, and we have to be there for them to answer their questions. So I would recommend that we have Ramadan. We always have Ramadan with the community. We share iftars with people. But this time, inshallah, we can take advantage of Ramadan with the family members. We try to encourage our children, inshallah, to be imams, to give some reminders Islamically, because this is part of our life. And we have to do all the time. Even some of the children, inshallah, can practice helping their mothers, preparing the iftar for the family, and doing some housework as well, to know how much parents are putting an effort, within the family or the household. So I would recommend, inshallah, that we take advantage of this situation, and we dedicate every single activity in Ramadan to be shared together as family members, inshallah.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. We have an initiative, by the way. We have an initiative that we announced.
Sure.
It's going to be, inshallah, 1,000 Quran reciter within Australia. So, inshallah, family members will be united and gathered online. Sheikhs, inshallah, various reciters will be reading the Quran together online, and the family members can all unite and gather holding the Quran and reading together. So, inshallah, we'll be doing this online starting from the first night of Ramadan. And every night we'll be reading one juz a night. And some people can practice even reading the Quran with the Shaykh. Every family member can be holding the Quran from their home and just listen to the Shaykh or the reciter while they are reading the Quran, inshallah, in the nights of Ramadan.
Sheikh, how can they find out more about that? On your Facebook page?
Facebook page,
Inshallah.
inshallah.
Inshallah. Oh, we've lost Sheikh. Good to hear Sheikh. Sorry, Sheikh. Yes. So if we could just have a look at Sheikh Khalat's Facebook page if you're interested in the 1,000 Quran reciters for Ramadan, inshallah. I just had a quick look at the Q&As, and there's quite a few, Q&As. I had a look at some of the questions, and they are quite long questions, and we are running out of time. So really quickly, Mesa, with most kids at home, most of the responsibility for motivating children in Ramadan will fall on the shoulders of parents. So, Mesa, just really quickly, some tips regarding motivating children in Ramadan, and then we'll go on to the Q&A session.
Yeah, sure. So, with all due respect with what the Sheikh said, of course, in Ramadan, let's focus on, the meaning of Ramadan and the intention. But in all realistic and logical sense, some of us have got younger children, some of us have children that aren't exactly thrilled to be, fasting in such an environment or personality wise. So what you have to do is you have to find a routine that suits your family. It's not something fits all families. Find a dialogue, explain to them what is, what you expect, what's going to happen. And most importantly is don't set huge standards. This is not the year to go, yep, I think we should do this every night. We're going to be together. We're going to chill. We're going to have the best Quran recitation every single night. Doing that will set you up quite a big disappointment if it doesn't reach there. So slow and steady in this month for this year.
Thank you so much. So we'll go to the questions, and like I said, they're quite meaningful and they're quite involved. So, Sheikh, you mentioned in one of your videos that it's not accepted to follow an imam online for Taraweeh prayers. So what can we do if our knowledge of surahs is very limited?
Yeah. So, everyone hear my voice now? Is my voice clear?
It's not very loud.
Okay. Okay. So regarding to the question, so the fatwa that has been issued regarding praying behind the imam online, it's missing one of the important conditions, which is to be in the link with the imam. So the lines have to be connected where the imam is. And since salah online is invalid, so with those who cannot, especially with Taraweeh prayer, inshallah, for those who are not memorizing enough surahs from the Quran, they can hold the Quran and read from it. So Taraweeh prayer does not require the person to be memorizing surahs of the Quran. They can hold the Quran in their hands and read from the Quran while they are leading the prayer, inshallah. So they don't have to be memorizing the Quran to be imams during the Taraweeh prayer. And it's sufficient for them to be reading from the Quran, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. So we'll go to Monique. Monique, there's a question here about someone's asking about domestic violence.
Yeah.
And when we talk about everything that happens to us is good, how do we understand that through the lens of someone who's experiencing domestic violence?
Yeah. So it's around, I think when I was mentioning that, I'm talking about the mindset that's useful to overcome anything that happens to us that is adverse, that on a large scale people would consider that is a traumatic adverse thing that is happening. How the mindset that's useful to overcome any of that is to not only talk about sometimes it's, what is the silver lining, what's the blessing in something, but it's also, the advantage of being able to utilize the characteristics and develop stronger characteristics through that adversity. I've got a saying, it's not what you go through, it's what you grow through. But totally, I don't think, in terms of responding to that question, no, of course that there's, oppression in all its forms is manifestly unjust. So we can call that out as, yes, being a negative event, in the same way that we can call the pandemic a negative event on our lives. The mindset required to overcome that is one where you can try and be positive through it. That certainly doesn't mean stay in it and do nothing about it because you're trying to sugarcoat something that is vastly unjust to your own mind and body, or to your family. No, absolutely not. So
Sure.
you need to move through
that clarification. Thanks, Monique. So Mesa, how do you cope with family and friends whining and complaining about being isolated? How do you not let their negativity affect you?
Okay, these are the drama queens and kings that we all know exist in every family, in every friendship circle. So you've got two choices. You can either ignore them or jump on their bandwagon. There's no two ways about it. Your best bet is not to jump on the drama bandwagon, and it'll be really difficult also to try to teach them new skills during this time. You can just mirror what you're doing. You can be pretty much an instigator of all good. Don't necessarily want to hear that. Thank you very much. And then that gives off the telltale signs that you're not joining that. I always say that it's their journey. So whatever someone's going through, there's choices behind that. There's a story behind that. But definitely don't go down that rabbit hole of drama. If somebody calls you and says to you, I can't believe this is happening to me, this is the worst thing ever. I mean, you can gently say, really, the worst thing ever? You can coax them that way. But again, how much energy you're going to spend trying to change somebody during your precious time?
Well put, thank you. So Sheikh, there's a hadith that mentions that when we are experiencing a calamity, we're encouraged to give charity. Can you please elaborate on that? Are there any particular guidelines, any specific kind of charity, or is it just any kind of charity?
Make sure that my voice is. Can everyone hear my voice now?
It's very low.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better here.
Okay. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminded us. He said in the hadith, whenever you have a calamity or a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing that we have to do is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the hardship. And the other thing is to give a charity, because a charity is helping us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through helping others. So there's two ways. The first one is from us straight to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is dua. And another way to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through helping others. And these are the two main ways to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that He can remove the hardship. So dua and giving a charity for the sake of Allah is the two main ways to remove the hardship. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So Maysa, what strategies can we implement with our children since we are working, schooling, playing all day and night in each other's faces?
Yeah, very common question. I hear this often at the moment from a lot of parents. Okay, context, guys. Just reframe. It's mindset, it's reframing, and it's lowering your expectations. You're not going to be able to take client calls in the same way that you can when you're at work prior to Corona. It's just a given. So remember what I said before, focus on what you can control. So if you know you have a good window of an opportunity where kids can go on their screens, or you know that it's a bit quiet at this time, go for it. Do your emailing, calls, whatever it is. At the same time, be reasonable. So the kids are going to see you at home. And remember, kids are just this way focused. So if you're at home, they've got no clue or representation that you have a life other than being a mum or a dad. So they're going to be like, oh, mum, 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 mum. That's a given. What you can do is focus on what you can control. That's all you can do.
Thanks, Maysa. So this one's directed to Monique. This unfortunate environment with loss of jobs has created a lot of pressure and strain between husbands and wives. Can you please provide some advice?
Yeah. Firstly, I think a really good website to go to is Beyond Blue. They've been significantly funded and as a result have put online a whole lot of resources for both individuals but also families to access that actually deal with the most common challenges from the virus. So in terms of people, the impact on businesses, the loss of the job, pressures on families, homeschooling, so you name it, almost any of those main issues that we've been talking about tonight on people's mental health and the impact on relationships. There's some updated resources, downloadable forums, helpline. It's a 24/7 helpline, in fact, online to help people to really answer some of those intricate questions. It's confidential service and perhaps referrals out to other more specific services like financial counselling to help couples, have a look at what's possible with their finances. And at least when you access a service like that, if they're not the right service, they're going to refer you on to the one who is. Particularly in these circumstances, so many different organisations have been very, very quickly funded, and things have changed even within our ability to offer psychological services online. So you can access, and you don't even have to leave home. A lot of these services now are being offered through telehealth or through Zoom appointments. It could also mean going and, to your accountant, or just go to someone who is an expert in that field, who more than likely has the answer that you at the moment don't. And as a result of you not having the answer, that's what's creating pressure and strains between husband and wife. Remember, you need to be in it together and work as a team. So sometimes just sitting down and putting everything on the table and looking at it from different points of view, because I mean, this situation has put pressure on all of us to really sit down together and draw on each other's strengths. Just keep in mind, people are going to be in a different space, so that if people are sort of going, oh, I don't want to talk about this, often that is anxiety, and anxiety leads to things like avoidance. So when people get really overwhelmed with something and they don't have a solution, they avoid it. That avoidance, though, is going to cause people more stress down the track. So try not to do that. Just be a problem solver, look at the problem, write it out, find an expert.
Okay, thank you so much, Monique. And I think we are gone a bit over time, so we might just leave it there. I think, alhamdulillah, we've actually answered everybody's questions, I think. If we haven't, I'll revisit the Q&A section. If we haven't, we'll make sure we get back to you individually, inshallah. But my utmost gratitude goes to our 3 wonderful guests, mashallah. I personally learnt so much from all your insights, and I'm sure the audience did as well. And I hope this is something that we can do again in the near future, inshallah. May Allah reward you all. Thank you to everyone who tuned in this evening, and inshallah Ramadan Mubarak. I hope you have a very blessed Ramadan, and may Allah accept all your fasts and your du'as. Please stay in touch, and jazakallah khair, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Thanks.
Alaikum salam.
And that's it from us.
Okay.